mahalo to everybody for joining us today. Um, Dennis and I came to this exact spot on January 17th, and that had been the first time that I had got to Frederick in almost 40 plus years. And essentially Dennis brought me right here because he said, come here and just throw some of my ashes up in the wind and that's it. You'll be done. I don't want any unity. I don't want any fuss made over me. But as Larry and Gaylord can testify very well, when they would ask Dennis about what arrangements he made, he'd always answer, don't worry about it, Andrew will take care of it. So, Dennis, if you're watching today, I took care of it.
Yeah.
It's probably not what you wanted, but we did it our way, okay? So, firstly, why did we play Hawaiian music today? And my wife doesn't know the answer. All I did was say I wanted to make this a really Hawaiian feel to it, and I'm very much moved by some of the aloha print that I see everybody wearing today. That's wonderful. Dennis lived in Hawaii for almost 40 years. I think about 39 years by now. Never really adopted a Hawaii feel or kind of a local way of living. You know, we'd have to kind of scold him every now and again about he's got his shoes on in the house. He lived in Hawaii way more time than he lived anywhere else. But the day before he passed, he still couldn't say Hawaiian names properly. He would screw up place names. He would screw up people's names. He just could not say Hawaiian words correctly. One of the fondest memories I will always have of Dennis is as his primary caregiver the last couple of years. I got into a rip-roaring fight with him at his apartment in Edmond about the proper way to cook rice. So, like every good soldier, even though I have no military background other than being a military brat, I got my secret weapons. His granddaughters and his daughter-in-law were Keiki Okaina. They grew up and were raised in Hawaii. They are daughters of the land of Hawaii. And I got them on Zoom and said, how do you cook rice? Now, I figured the grandfather was not going to argue against his granddaughters, who were both award-winning speech and debaters. Well, we all know how stubborn Dennis was, and probably still is. He was not going to lose this fight. So we actually debated on Zoom for at least an hour about the proper way to cook rice and how to use a rice cooker. And even after we hung up, he goes, you're still wrong. Even though they said, the way that I was doing it was correct, he just would not go with that. But the last song that we played is the national anthem of the Kingdom of Hawaii, Hawaii Pono'i. And I wanted this played for a specific reason. Nothing political. There's going to be no political statements today, even though Dennis I believe in his later years, liked a good political argument. Nothing political about this at all, other than the fact that one of his great loves was attending University of Hawaii sports, and particularly UH football at Aloha Stadium. And I will swear to you, this Jewish man from Brooklyn, New York, standing up in front of 50,000 people, he was going to belt out the words to Hawaii Pono'i, the loudest in that entire stadium, regardless of how he pronounced the words. He loved that. He loved that song and what it stood for, Hawaii. But we share this, our aloha from our family to his ohana, his family here in Oklahoma, because we are truly grateful for the friendship that you gave him all of these years, particularly these last 7 or 8 years, since he moved back. My main goal today is to share with you what I know of his life, and really about those years in Hawaii, because I think many of you really only had those 5 or 6 years of his high school years here in Frederick, Oklahoma. And we were lucky enough to have 39 years of him in Hawaii with us. But really, his heart was not in Brooklyn. His heart was not in Hawaii. His heart was here in Oklahoma. This was the home in his heart. This is where he wanted to be. So, rather than eulogize Dennis, because he just did not want me to do this, I'm just going to share with you some thoughts. I'm going to try and keep it as light as possible. But really, it comes to my mind, all of us here today, God has a plan for us. We don't know what God's plan is for us as individuals or as godly people on earth. It really depends upon our relationship with the Lord and how deep that relationship is, that we learn what does God have planned for us. Well, I submit to you today that God had a plan for Dennis Stephen Feinberg. Dennis Stephen Feinberg of Inman, Oklahoma, passed away peacefully at age 80 on March 7th, 2022, surrounded by his family. He was born in 1941 in Brooklyn, New York, and moved with his parents, Bernard and Mildred, and sister Marilyn, to Frederick, Oklahoma when he was 13. Dennis was a member of the 1956 Frederick High School Bombers football team, the first integrated high school football team to win a state championship. This team was inducted as a team of legend into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame in 2007. Dennis graduated from Frederick High School in 1959 and then attended the University of Oklahoma and Northeastern State College before joining the Air Force in 1964. Dennis served in the United States Air Force as a navigator, weapons systems officer or operator, flying the F-111A, the RF-4, and the EB-66 aircraft. He served several combat tours in Southeast Asia and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his bravery in Operation Linebacker and Linebacker 2 during the Vietnam conflict. He was also stationed for 2 tours in the United Kingdom, specifically in Alconbury, England. And it was during his first tour at RAF Alconbury that he adopted an English baby whom he named Barry Stephen Feinberg. His second tour of England took him to what we call the Midlands, to RAF Upper Heyford, where he flew the F-111A. And it was during this time at RAF Upper Heyford that he met my mama, as we say in England, me mum. He met me mum, Eileen. At the time she worked for the Office of Special Investigations at RAF Upper Heyford. And it was really during this time that we started this kind of blended familydom of Dennis, Barry, Eileen, and Andrew, as we would do fun things around England. One of our great memories was taking the train to the docks in Harwich and taking a ferry boat over to Holland for the weekend. Those are the kind of things that we, like to do during our time. On May 28, 1977, my mom and I left England and we moved to Mountain Home, Idaho to join Barry and Dennis. And we hadn't been there a day or so when we started making this immediate trek from Mountain Home to Frederick, Oklahoma. As a 13-year-old, Dennis had his Seeing America experience as his family trekked from Brooklyn to Oklahoma. As a 13-year-old, I had my Seeing America experience driving in the back of a station wagon from Idaho to Frederick, Oklahoma. In 1979, Dennis left the Air Force and moved the family to Hawaii to begin a business for the next Air Force buddy. The business name was Monday Molding. Monday Molding imported picture frame molding from Taiwan, and the company served as a wholesaler to various picture framing stores around the islands. Remember, he couldn't say the names of the places. How he made it as a salesperson. But it was during this time they also started a side business called Monday Milling. And Monday Milling imported raw koa timber from the Big Island, and they would mill the timber into koa picture frame molding. That's where his love of wood turning first started, was milling koa planks into koa picture frames. So despite having a corner on the market, being the only picture frame molding business in Hawaii, the early 80s were a hard time to do business for yourself in Hawaii. Sensing this, Dennis used some of his GI benefits to further his education, this time in computer science from Chaminade University in Honolulu. coupled with his MBA from Troy State University, he entered the legal world, becoming a business administrator for various law firms in Honolulu, before eventually retiring from the law firm of Sterling and Tucker, where both he and my mom, Eileen, worked, she as a paralegal. My parents spent many years refurbishing an old house in Kailua, Hawaii, into their dream home. No, it does not happen overnight like you see on TV. And in the case of them, almost a generation, it seems, was put into that house. But they spent many, many, many hours just pouring their love into their dream home. But it was really during these years that my parents were setting down their roots as a married couple in Hawaii. Outside of working on the house, he enjoyed wood turning, carpentry, University of Hawaii sports, ballroom dancing, playing the harmonica, and being a doting papa. In 2018, Dennis returned to Oklahoma to enjoy his sunset years. Quote, "I don't know what it is, but Oklahoma just pulls me back," he said. In hindsight, those are some of the best years of Dennis's life. So what was God's plan for Dennis Stephen Feinberg? I don't really know the answer. And I hope some of you can maybe share what some of your thoughts were. But let me just share two stories with you. In the summer of 2014, we took my mom's ashes, which we scattered in our home village of Sibold-Hedingham, which is about 40 miles northeast of London. A little farming community just like Frederick. Sibold-Hedingham is surrounded by wheat fields and sugar beet fields. I'm so reminded of Essex and Sibold-Hedingham when I pull into Frederick. But we scattered her ashes at the mill pond, and we'll be scattering some of Dennis's ashes there also next summer to be with Mom. There's a little bit of Mom in here today that will be resting with him. But after we had the ceremony, we took Dennis to the Imperial War Museum in Duxford, England, because they have a section of the museum entitled American Airmen in Europe. And it has, the very second you walk through the front door of this wing of the museum, his actual airplane is right there. And we took this to show him as a surprise. And he stood looking at this airplane, and he was mentally going through the serial number, and he goes, "I'm positive I flew that actual plane." So we spent some time, and he showed his granddaughters some of the intricacies of the airplane, and then we spent a little bit of time walking around the museum, and I was with him. And then I saw something that I wanted to take a look at, and then he went off. You know, Dennis was not one to sit still for very long in one place. But then I noticed he walked off, and he was standing, looking at something for a long time. So I went over to him. I said, "What you found?" And he goes, "Look." And what it was Vietnamese surface to air missile. And he goes, I've never seen one before. I guess that's what they were shooting at me. Clearly God had his hand on Dennis's time in Southeast Asia to bring him home safe to us, so that today, in 2022, he can meet his granddaughters. The second story I want to share with you takes us to March and April of 1941 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Belfast, at the time, was a very lightly defended city. However, it had an enormous strategic importance to the German Air Force because it was the home of the Howland and Wolff shipbuilding yards. This is where the Royal Navy built all of their ships. It was there in Belfast. In March and early April 1941, the city took a heavy bombardment from the German Air Force. And on one of those nights, my mother's house took a direct hit, and the house was completely destroyed. Somehow, God's hand was over her and her family that night. So today, in 2022, you can meet her grandchildren. But why are we also celebrating today, June 8th, 2022? Because of God's hand being over those two individuals when they were much younger in life. We are here today to celebrate their 45th wedding anniversary. June 8th, 1977, they were married here in Frederick, Oklahoma. And that's why we chose today. God works in mysterious ways. I'm not sure if we have the answers. You know, Dennis will always be remembered for his devotion to his family, his friends, his fur babies. But that devotion would not have happened if God had not been there for him over Southeast